conflict as a result of superpowers becoming involved, mainly the United States supporting Israel and the Arab countries such as Egypt supporting the Palestinian cause. There has been over 50 years of tension as a result of this conflict. However, the immigration to My name is Julie Hluchota. Today I want to discuss the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. It's hard to believe that a piece of land the size of Maryland is responsible for the global conflict called the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. This is a decade-old global problem as a result of the superpowers that have gotten involved, specifically the United States supporting Israel and the Arab countries such as Egypt supporting the Palestinian people. When comparing this to other historical disputes involving land, why is this so different? In my talk, I will briefly present a fact-based history of this conflict, specifically focusing on maintaining the unbiased perspective so that my audience can come to the conclusion about who is responsible for this conflict on their own. I'll first provide a brief history of the conflict and then go into some of the main reasons for the recent clash and violence that occurred in Israel between Hamas and the Israeli people. This conflict began because of land disagreements in the late 1800s. The Jewish people realized that there was a growing animosity toward their people, and a group of elite Jewish people got together and came to the conclusion that they needed a homeland for themselves. After consulting the Bible, they determined that this location should be Palestine because of its proximity to Jerusalem. Although the Palestinian people had been the majority in this country for centuries, they began to systematically bring hundreds of thousands of Jews into that land in order to eventually take over the country and name it Israel for themselves. The first Aliyah, which is what these mass immigrations were called, occurred in 1882 and was a group of 25,000 Jewish people that came from Europe into Palestine. As you can see from my chart, the groups became larger and larger as the years progressed. The first Aliyah in 1882 was a group of 25,000 people, again that came from Europe into Palestine. With each consecutive immigration, they became larger and larger, with the last group being a group of over 200,000 people. This increase in Jews was recognized by the Palestinian people and created the animosity which has characterized this conflict for over the past 50 years. There have been many attempts at negotiating a resolution between the Israelis and the Palestinians, however, none have resulted in a peaceful resolution. The first attempt at a resolution was post-World War II, when the United Nations got involved and drew the present-day boundaries for Israel and the Palestinian areas called the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. The next attempt at a resolution was the Camp David talks, which were hosted by President Jimmy Carter and held between the President of Egypt and the Israeli Prime Minister. However, these talks were ultimately useless as a result of the new Prime Minister having no intention of negotiating with the Palestinian Liberation Organization, which was the voice of the Palestinian people. He ultimately stalled the talks because there was nothing that he could gain out of these negotiations. The next and probably most successful attempt at a resolution was the Oslo Accords, which were held between Israel and the PLO, or the Palestinian Liberation Organization. These talks were also ultimately unsuccessful, and the only result was that the PLO and the State of Israel ultimately recognized each other. However, the creation of a Palestinian state was not successful. The recent escalation of violence by both sides has put the conflict back at the front of the global spotlight, serving as a reminder that a resolution still has not been accomplished. The main reasons for the recent escalation in violence is because of the Israeli forces that have been occupying the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. These two areas, again, are the main areas for the Palestinian people. The Israelis have applied blockades at both of the borders, limiting the movement of goods in and out of the region. Also, the Israelis are in charge of the coastlines, which restricts the economic benefit that the Palestinians could have had it been something that they were in control of. With backing from the United States, Israel has opposed the authority of any any democratically elected group called Hamas, which, although it was democratically elected, the United States refuses to support because of their use of violence towards the towards the Israelis. The group called Hamas has been cited as a terror group by the United States as well as other countries in the West. Currently, there is no ceasefire agreement in place between Israel and Hamas or the Palestinian leadership in the Gaza Strip, and there are negotiations that are still taking place in order to form a more long-term resolution. However, as a result of the disagreements that remain, it is unclear whether or not there will be any successful negotiations that come out of these most recent talks. As long as the key disputes remain, which are who will have control of Jerusalem, where will these Palestinian refugees go, and most notably, when will there be the recognition of the Palestinian state, something that Israel does not support. It is unclear, again, when a negotiation will be successful. It's surprising that all of this conflict and all of this violence that has occurred for over 50 years is the result of a piece of land the size of Maryland. But perhaps, like someone said from the Israeli and Palestinian Journal, maybe if the Palestinians and Israelis could have more exposure to each other, they could ultimately come to an agreement that would be based more on each other being humans rather than each other being just enemies. Thank you. How long was that?
A little over 7 minutes.
Oh my God.